I truly pray that is our heart, that in all situations we will wait for the Lord. That's where our hope is. That's where our strength is. I wanted to thank Justin for giving me the privilege. One of the things that Justin and I do during the week, we actually take time to discuss Ezra. We've been looking at the passage together. We've been doing a lot of different things, and he had a very busy week, and so I was thankful to be able to do and share tonight. So thank you, son, for this privilege. About 4 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, give or take some, maybe 5, there was this thing called COVID that impacted our country and impacted individuals. Is that true? One of the things that came out of that time was a statement of faith over fear. Because one of the things that COVID did in the way that, without getting in political and all that other stuff, one of the things that COVID did was brought out an aspect of fear in many different ways. And then that fear, from a variety of different ways, began to control activities and actions. And for the Christian, a comment that started becoming very popular was faith over fear. And I understand that biblical principle is there, and that they were basically crying out that because the way COVID was being projected is that what it did is brought out the idea that our country and the majority of our people in our country had no hope, no real hope. And so there was tremendous fear that if you die with no hope, if you're living with no hope, and you have this disease that's impacting a whole lot of people, Christians, we have hope, so we can have faith over fear. And as you've heard in the songs, and even in this, I will wait for you, he will be in that passage of waiting like a watchman waiting for the morning. And it's repeated twice in there. Did you see that in that verse? It's repeated twice. So when it's repeated twice, what do you think you and I should do? Pay a little bit of attention to it. If you've ever been out in the dark at night, what is it that you're truly hoping for and longing for? It's usually daylight. And the idea behind that is our heart should have that same exact desire for the Lord at all times. That I want him like I would want daylight when it's pitch black. Are there not times in our lives when discouragement and frustration come into play? That's why I'm excited about sharing this message with you. But what I'm doing tonight is I've come up with just a little bit different way of saying faith over fear. Instead of saying faith over fear, I'm actually tonight going to show you that faith comes out of fear and why that's true and how God's planned it to be that way. And last week, Justin was in Ezra chapter 3, and he had the privilege of talking about how, like in verse 11, it says, all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord because the foundation of the Lord's house has been laid. And the idea is that we have tremendous praising opportunities when we get to serve the Lord. If you were here earlier for Fred's memorial, one of the things that came out really loud and clear was his great praise for how this man served the Lord. There's tremendous praise in that aspect of it. And so chapter 3 ends with the people being super excited that God's work is being done. And then there's chapter 4. And I'm just going to read chapter 4 for you, and you follow along as I read it, and listen, because there's a change that takes place. So listen as I read this, and I'll do my best with these names. My son is more gifted than I am at some of these names, but we'll go for it, okay? Ezra chapter 4. When the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the family heads and said to them, let us build with you, for we also worship your God, and have been sacrificing to him since the time King Esarhaddon of Assyria brought us here. But Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other heads of Israel's families answered them, you may have no part with us in building a house for our God, since we alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, had commanded us. Then the people who were already in the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build. They also bribed officials to act against them to frustrate their plans throughout the reign of King Cyrus of Persia until the reign of King Darius of Persia. At the beginning of the reign of Ahasuerus, the people who were already in the land wrote an accusation against the residents of Judah and Jerusalem. During the time of King Artaxerxes of Persia, Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of the colleagues wrote to King Artaxerxes. The letter was written in Aramaic and translated. Rehum, the chief deputy, and Shimshai, the scribe, wrote a letter to King Artaxerxes concerning Jerusalem as follows. From Rehum, the chief deputy, Shimshai, the scribe, and the rest of their colleagues, the judges and magistrates from Tripolis, Persia, Erech, Babylon, Susa, that is, the people of Elam, and the rest of the peoples whom the great and illustrious Ashurbanipal deported and settled in the cities of Samaria and the region west of the Euphrates River. This is the text of the letter they sent to him. To King Artaxerxes from your servants, the men from the region west of the Euphrates River. Let it be known to the king that the Jews who came from you have returned to us at Jerusalem. They are rebuilding that rebellious and evil city, finishing its walls and repairing its foundations. Let it now be known to the king that if that city is rebuilt and its walls are finished, they will not pay tribute, duty, or land tax, and the royal revenue will suffer. Since we have taken an oath of loyalty to the king, and it is not right for us to witness his dishonor, we have sent to inform the king that a search should be made in your predecessor's record books. In these record books, you will discover and verify that the city is a rebellious city, harmful to kings and provinces. There have been revolts in it since ancient times. That is why the city was destroyed. We advise the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are finished, you will not have any possession west of the Euphrates. The king sent a reply to his chief deputy, Rehum, Shimshai, the scribe, and the rest of their colleagues living in Samaria and elsewhere in the region west of the Euphrates River, greetings. The letter you sent us has been translated and read in my presence. I issued a decree and a search was conducted. It was discovered that this city has had uprisings against kings since ancient times, and there have been rebellions and revolts in it. Powerful kings have also ruled over Jerusalem and exercised authority over the whole region west of the Euphrates River, and tribute, duty, and land tax were paid to them. Therefore, issue an order for these men to stop so that this city will not be rebuilt until a further decree has been pronounced by me. See that you not neglect this matter, otherwise the damage will increase and the royal interest will suffer. As soon as the text of King Artaxerxes' letter was read to Rehum, Shimshai the scribe, and their colleagues, they immediately went to the Jews in Jerusalem and forcibly stopped them. Now the construction of God's house in Jerusalem had stopped and remained at a standstill until the second year of the reign of King Darius of Persia. So we went from chapter 3, verse 11, where the people were shouting and praising and excited about the foundation being built. But then in chapter 4, we see in verse 4, then the people that were already in the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build. And then you get to verse 24, and it says, now the construction of God's house in Jerusalem had stopped and remained at a standstill until the second year of the reign of King Darius of Persia. So what happened? What happened? They went from super excited about what God was doing to stopping the work. Have you guys ever experienced anything like that? You get excited about something and then circumstances change and all of a sudden you have a whole different perspective of things. So I wanted you to kind of see here that faith over fear or fear over faith are two different things. Just having faith over fear basically doesn't solve the problems. Just, I got to have faith and you want to do that. But there's also fear that takes place over faith. And that's what I want to look at tonight is what caused, in Ezra chapter 4, verse 4, what caused the people to be made afraid to build? And the thing is, God's enemy got involved. And by the way, you notice that I put in parentheses, who else's enemy? It's God's enemies, but it's whose enemy as well? It's our enemy. I hope you realize that God's enemy is our enemy. God's enemy is excellent. Listen to this. God's enemy is excellent at using fear to direct us away from living by faith in God. Let me say that again. God's enemy, our enemy, is excellent at using fear to direct us away from living by faith in God. Let that sink in a little bit. I could even go a step further and say Satan's goal is to use fear to influence our hope in and from God in a negative way, so we will seek our own way instead of faith in God's way. If your hope and my hope is taken away, how quickly do we get discouraged and frustrated? And Satan's goal, by bringing in a sense, fear to our lives, his goal for it is to take us away from trusting God and losing our hope in what he has for us. So I want to ask the question, would it be wise? Would it be wise to know the basic strategy or strategic plan of how Satan operates to produce this functioning in fear over faith? Would it be wise to do that? And by the way, the next several slides are going to have that little reminder down at the bottom. Important fact, it will be a part of the Christian life. What I'm going to be talking to you about tonight is going to be a regular part of the Christian life. Satan's always going to be attempting to discourage and frustrate your life and your plans, to take away your hope so that you stop putting your faith in who Christ is. So at some point, what I want to do tonight, just for a little fun, is that whenever I get down to that part of the slide, I'm going to say important fact, and then what I want you to do is to read the rest of the phrase, okay? So let's just practice that one time, see how y'all do, all right? Important fact. It will be part of the Christian life. Okay, good. First time, we'll see how this goes after there. Now, I wanted to also give you an idea using the word fear, an acrostic of what Satan's trying to accomplish. A good acrostic, these aren't my teeth, I'm breaking them in for Justin, but sorry. Fear. What Satan's trying to do is to take your faith and expel it and replace it. And that's how I want to approach explaining what happened here in chapter 4 in Ezra. The first thing that he does to expel and to replace your fear is to actually acclimate himself with the ministry. And one of the things that we see in Ezra 4, verses 1 and 2, part of the first part of 2, says, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the family heads and said to them, okay, what I want you to see here is that they heard that there was work being done for the Lord. One of the things that our enemy is good at, Satan is good at, is by having all his corporals, so to speak, all his demons, They're aware of what's going on in this world, and anytime they see a work that starts to work for the Lord, they're hearing about it, and they're going to approach it to find out a little bit about it. One of the things that they're going to do is the enemy is always looking for where God is working so they can destroy it. It's not about, we just want to see what's going on. They want to get acclimated with it so that they ultimately can destroy that work. The Bible tells us, I think it's in 2 Peter, 1 Peter, that the devil walks about as a what? Roaring lion, seeking who he can get a snack on? No, what? Whom he may what? Devour. Okay, so the enemy wants to destroy us, and he will approach where God is working to become familiar with it. Important fact.
It will be part of the Christian life.
Important fact.
It will be part of Christ.
As long as roots stay focused on doing the things that God wants us to do as a church, the enemy is going to be approaching us and wanting to become acclimated with this church so that he can destroy it. In the rest of verse 2, it says, they approached Zerubbabel and the family heads and said to them, let us build with you, for we also worship your God and have been sacrificing to him since the time King Esarhaddon of Assyria brought us here. His enemy will even try to infiltrate, our enemy will try to infiltrate the work to sabotage it. The Bible does talk about at the end the parable of the wheat and the tares and the different fish, that there are going to be, in a sense, lost people a lot of times within the body. Now, I don't mean to be overly dramatic on this, but one of the things that song brought out of I will wait for you, God's purpose will not change, but man's will change quickly. It's one of the things we always have to watch for in this church. But the idea is that they said, look, we worship the same God you do. We even sacrifice to that God. I thought it was interesting. They said, your God. Just the way the phraseology. One of the things that Pastor Justin and I looked at when we were looking at this passage, there's a lot of really strong truth in here, but there's not a lot of detail that goes with some of it. They said, we've sacrificed. We sacrifice to your God. We do the same things you're doing. So they will try to infiltrate and sabotage it. Important fact. What are you figuring out so far? Will it be part of the Christian life? I wanted to give you two passages of Scripture that talked about the people that were there. In 2 Kings 17:33, it brings out an idea of who these people were. Several of the commentaries I read talked about that these were actually like Samaritans. They had a Jewish history, but they were also had a mixed aspect of the different conquering countries that came in. So they had some foundation with Jewish part of it, Israel, but they had a lot of other stuff in there too. And 2 Kings 17:33 kind of puts it together as a little bit. So they feared the Lord, but, and as soon as you say but, that cancels out the first part, right? But also served what? Their own gods, after the manner of the nations from among whom they had been carried away. So they didn't truly serve the God of Israel. They served basically their own God. And Isaiah 29:13 brings it out in a different way. He says, and the Lord said, because this people draw near with their mouth and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and listen to this, their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. Should we fear based on commandments by men, or should we fear because of God's law and who God says he is? So that gives you a little insight as to who these people were that wanted to join the work. And the idea is that from the outside perspective, they will have a good look. They will want to do some of the things that we'll do as a church. But ultimately, they want to do things their own way, which will then destroy what? The idea of the work of God. And then in verse 3 it says, this is the answer that Zerubbabel and Jeshua, the leaders, said. Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other heads of Israel families answered them, "You may have no part with us in building a house for our God, since we alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, had commanded us." Now, they took a great stand here. They knew that they had been given specific orders by the king and ultimately by God, because God had roused their hearts, if you remember, okay? Roused their hearts to go back and do this. And so they said, "No, we're not letting you get involved because this is what God's called us to do." So their resolve was pretty good, was it not? And so the enemy, one of the reasons the enemy begins to approach and to acclimate itself and begin to look at what's going on, the enemy needs to, in one sense, observe the resolve that you and I have to do the work of the Lord. And then ultimately, the resolve that they discover will lead to the attacks that they send. So I want you to think about that. If you don't have a lot of resolve, how great is the attack going to be? But if you have strong resolve, then how great will the attack be? And I hope that as a body that we have tremendously strong resolve and understand that there could be some serious attacks coming. Not to scare you, not to frighten us, but to think about the reality that this can happen. If this work is truly of God, which I believe it is, and seeing what God's doing, then we can understand that if God's name is being glorified and God's work is being accomplished, guess what the enemy is going to do? And so one of the things I wanted you to see here is the enemy does come in and probe and actually figures out our resolve for going forward. Important fact. How's that for a statement? Then the attack comes. The actual attack that works to expel and to replace our faith. In verse 4, it says, "Then the people who were already in the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build." This is one of those things where there's not a lot of detail given as to what made them afraid. I think it's a combination of everything that's written here in this chapter. But the idea is that nothing specific is given as to what made them afraid. But two things about this verse that I wanted to bring out. He uses people to cause this. He uses people to cause this. People that you may even think that you trust. People that have good intentions. That's why we always have to put the fear of the Lord first. And it can be physical fear. You know, bullying, that could be like, we've got weapons, we've got this, and you come and they're afraid for their life. It can be that physical. It may not be just a fear of your life. It can be fear of this is going to hurt a lot physically when they beat me up or whatever. Okay, there's going to be a lot of that could be involved with it. It could be in bigger perspectives. It can be, man, the life that I want is not going to happen. And that ties into the mental side of it as well. Because there's an idea of how many of us like contentment in life? And when you start serving the Lord and the enemy gets involved, guess usually what goes out a lot of times? The things that we want don't happen. And then even security. How important is security to each one of us? And how about quality of life? You see, when the enemy comes in and starts attacking, one of the things they're trying to do is to really impact physically or mentally our contentment, our security, and our quality of life. And have you experienced physical or mental fear? Important fact. Once again, I'm not having you say this over and over to try to scare or try to get you to go, oh no. But the reality is, if you're a child of Christ and you're serving him and you're doing the work of the Lord, these things will be true. Then verse 5, another attack comes. They also bribed officials to act against them, to frustrate their plans throughout the reign of King Cyrus of Persia and until the reign of King Darius of Persia. They bribed officials with the idea to show where the real power is. They want you to see, our enemy, Satan wants you to see that there's no hope for plans God to work when they bring in this power over the things of this world. See, they will attack you with fear mentally and physically to try to take away your hope for contentment, security, and quality of life. And then they will come in and they'll do things like bribe officials or whatever to show you, quote, where the real power is in this world. How many times has Christian ministries been thwarted by the things that government does? In fact, you take a look at China. How open is China, the country, to the things of God and Christianity? But yet, you know what we know about China? The underground church is thriving. Got to be serious. So they will do things, our enemy will do things to try to put you in a place where you think that God's power has somehow been overcome. Important fact. Then in verse 6, we have another thing that comes up. At the beginning of the reign of Ahasuerus, the people who were already in the land wrote an accusation against the residents of Judah and Jerusalem. I don't know about you, but as I read that letter, I hope you heard all the different false things that were in there, plus some things that were partially true. Here's one of the things that Christians we struggle with the most. False statements to control the narrative. Spin. If you were to get political, after every time there's a State of the Union address or some sort of speech by a politician, what do both sides do? They put a spin on it, trying to put what? What was really said. God's enemy will always put a narrative or a false spin on what God's work is trying to accomplish. In other words, it can fabricate a devious plot. It can destroy a reputation. And that last one, even the devious plot to destroy reputation, when we see these things, our desire is almost immediately to try to fix that and force people to understand the truth, right? Is that allowing the fear to overcome your faith when you're trying to force and fix a narrative? Or are you trusting God through the process? You see, ultimately what Satan's trying to do is to get you to see no hope to change that narrative, so you might as well give up. I've led several ministries, and one of the hardest things to deal with is false accusations. In many ways, I've tried to just learn to trust God to handle the truth part of it and go forward, being obedient. Because how much of the narrative do you think I could really control? What I can control is what? If I continue to wait for the Lord and trust Him through the process. See, I know that the way Satan attacks is to take that mental or physical fear, to take away our hope for the contentment, security, and quality of life that we want. and desire that God's actually created us to enjoy in him. I also know that they're going to try to take away our hope that God is in control, that they're going to show who, quote, the real power is with here on this world. And then they're also going to try to take the hope away by creating this false narrative that we have really no hope of overcoming, so to speak. Those are the three main ways that Satan will attack us. And all of this is to achieve the bottom line of expelling and replacing our faith. He wants to achieve. And what he wants to achieve is found in verse 4 of this chapter. It says, then the people who were already in the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build. They also bribed officials to act against them to frustrate their plans throughout the reign of King Cyrus of Persia and unto the reign of King Darius of Persia. What he's trying to do by infiltrating, acclimating himself, discovering our resolve, and then attacking is to create a situation where you and I become discouraged and frustrated with ministry. Discouraged that things are happening. We start to doubt, is God capable of actually helping us to overcome this? To the point where we'll maybe be disobedient or we will just stop doing or frustrate the plans. When we see that in many ways that God's plans are being frustrated in our mind, then what we do is we say, okay, well, those plans don't work, so I have to come up with my what? My own plans. How dangerous is that one, by the way? Right? So his goal in all of this is to achieve the tools of discouragement and frustration, tools that lead us to question our obedience to God and our faith in God. And those are the two greatest tools that he can use against us when it comes to faith, is discouragement and frustration. Important fact. Now, how's that for encouragement tonight? Because I don't know a lot of people here, but I do know Christianity. And my guess is if I were to talk with each one of you tonight, there would be times in your life where you face discouragement and where you face frustration. And you had the temptation at that point to I'm either going to trust God and go beyond that and not worry about the discouragement and all the stuff that goes with that attack, or I'm still going to trust God's plan. I'm not going to put my plan into place. This is part of the Christian life. And the way I'm putting this is that the reason I say this is discouragement often leads to quitting. Just giving up. You've made the assessment in your life that there's no hope, so you expel faith. Now, if I were to ask people physically, do they do that? Do you expel faith? Most Christians will say, no, I don't expel faith. But the reality is your actions will show what? That you stopped acting in faith because of your discouragement. Frustrated plans often lead to using your own understanding. You've made the assessment of no hope, so faith is replaced with your understanding. Faith in your plans. You notice this one has a little bit of a change down here. Important fact.
We can expect the strategy to happen against us at roots.
Especially folks as a church plant. A baby church, so to speak. We will face things. I hope that when discouragement or frustration, that temptation comes in, that we go back and say, oh, by the way, he will be. He is faithful. He cannot deny himself. God is faithful. And when I trust in the Lord with all my heart, and I lean not on my own understanding, and I acknowledge him in every way that I do, he will direct my what? My path. When we're tempted with discouragement and frustration, we need to go back and remember those things. So in verse 24, at the end of the chapter, it says the construction of God's house in Jerusalem had stopped. So I want to ask the question, was that faith over fear, or was that fear over faith? Pretty simple answer, isn't it? They were letting their fear stop and overcome faith. Is fear over faith, then, God's intention? Or is faith over fear God's intention? Right? So I wanted to take a look at the idea is that God actually knows exactly how Satan works to create fear. Now, what I just shared with you is a little bit down on the negative side, right? This is how the enemy is going to attack. Now I want you to understand the promises and the passion of God behind all this, because God, how many of you believe that God knows exactly how Satan's going to attack and what Satan's doing? Right? He even plans, listen to this, he even plans to take what Satan does and turn it into something good. That's how powerful our God is. He can take something that the enemy says, I'm going to destroy this work, and I'm going to create a narrative that's awful for individuals. I'm going to do all these things, and yet God says, oh, by the way, I'm going to take that and turn it into something good. And the story that we know about is Joseph, right, in the Old Testament. How many of you would like to have gone through what Joseph went through? Do you think there were times when he possibly could have been discouraged and frustrated with life? But yet the Bible keeps telling us that he kept what? Putting his life under the authority of God, and God did all of these things. Ultimately, as it says in Genesis 50:20, he's talking to his brother, you planned evil against me. It was not right. It was wrong. It was evil what you did. But God planned it for good to bring about the present results so that the nation of Israel would not starve to death. The survival of many people. I hope that you and I get so excited about this idea that God planned it for good to bring about the present result. I can look back over my life and see some struggles and issues that I've gone through, and the benefit of that for my life where it is today is tremendous. I'm not trying to make light of going through some of these difficulties and these frustrations, that it's like a piece of cake, you throw them out the window, it's no big deal. I understand the intensity, and I know the attack, and I know the depth that it goes many times. But the idea is that as deep as that attack goes, how much further can God go? Can God bring comfort that goes way beyond anything that you're suffering? Can God bring peace to any situation that you're in? Can he bring joy regardless of what's going on in your life? You have to trust that. You have to realize that that's what God's trying to do. So I wanted to look at this faith out of fear aspect that I was talking about. I believe that one of the things that God's trying to do is that he allows these fear things to come into our life so that we can break free of the things that fear causes us to do that are ungodly and take us away from God, that get us discouraged and get us frustrated, so that we can break out of that and have faith that comes out of that. Just really quickly, God's plan for real hope, he wants our faith engaged and released. He doesn't want it expelled and replaced. He wants it engaged and released. And the way he does that, I could teach hours on some of these passages, but I'm just going to give you highlights of some passages here that will show you what I'm talking about. In 1 Peter 1, 6-7, it says, in this you rejoice. Boy, that's a hard phrase right there. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though it is tested by fire, may be found to the result in praise and glory and honor. That's a revelation of Jesus Christ. God plans to show you where you allow fear to keep you from trusting God's provision for real hope in all areas of your life. He does that on purpose. Important fact. This will be part of the Christian life. And he's not doing it to put you down. He's trying to show you that if you trust me in this area, there's going to be a deeper and stronger blessing for you. Because if you don't overcome that area that he's trying to show you you're weak in, then you're going to get into that discouragement and frustration. And when you get in there and you let those things control you, how good is that for you? So God's heart is to show you those areas that you allow fear to overcome your faith. So in other words, what he's trying to do is to help you break free so that your faith can be engaged and released. 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 10. Man, I wish I could a whole series on these verses, but anyway, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. He says our bodies are like jars of clay. How powerful are clay jars? They can be broken pretty easy, right? But look at what it says. I know that you have jars of clay, but I'm in you, so the surpassing power belongs to God, not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. God plans to show his power working through us as proof of the real hope we have in him. So not only is he trying to show you areas that you actually allow fear to influence your life, he's saying, beyond that, I actually want to use your life now as a way to prove that there is real hope out there. Going back to COVID, you know what I wanted this nation to see more than anything? Was the real hope of Christ. Because COVID showed that this world has no hope, true hope. Important fact. It will be part of the Christian life. God wants to use your life, by the way, to prove that his hope is real. And then one of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 41 through 3. Once again, it goes along with this theme that we've looked at tonight. I waited patiently. I waited for the Lord, and I waited as long as it took. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up from the pit of destruction out of the miry bog and set my feet on a rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. Life is going to be life whether you're a Christian or not. There are going to be times when you feel like life is the pit of destruction. There's going to be times when your life feels like you're in a miry bog. But when you wait patiently and cry out to the Lord, he's going to take you out of that and set your feet on a rock, Christ, and make your steps secure. And when he does that, it's going to ignite your heart to sing praises and talk about him. And when you talk about him, other people are going to see that. They're going to fear the Lord, and some of them are going to put their trust in Christ. God plans to use our lives as examples of the real hope he offers, so lost people will put their trust in the Lord. Do you see how he takes what Satan plans for an attack to destroy, and he turns it all around and says, here, we have victory in this. Important fact. Yeah. Your life being used for lost people to be saved because of what they see, the hope in you and the things that he's done in your life as part of it. You see, God's plan for real hope for Roots Bible Church, he wants our faith engaged, and he wants our faith released so that we can accomplish what this church is about, of what? Making disciples. Of how many ages? How many stages? And how many places? Important fact. So let's not be like the Israelites in chapter 4 of Ezra. Let's understand that Satan's going to attack if this church grows and becomes effective for Christ by making disciples and discipling them, becomes effective at doing that. The enemy will acclimate himself, approach us, test our resolve, will attack us to achieve discouragement and frustration. We need to turn that around and say, God, you now take this And you turned it in so our faith is engaged and released in all of this. Lord, we understand you're testing our faith. We understand that you want us to have faith that doesn't allow fear to impact us in a negative way. No matter what's going on in our life, how rough it is, God, you can overcome that so that people can see your hope is real. And because I do wait, and you actually personally have picked me up out of the miry bog and that pit of destruction and placed my feet on a rock and made my life secure, and I'm praising you for it, people are going to see that and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Important fact. This is part of the Christian life. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for your word. And Father, I know this message has been a tremendous encouragement and challenge to me this week to narrow this down. I do pray that you would help each one of us, Father, to understand that fear will be a part of life in the way that it will be presented to us. Our enemy will attack us to discourage us, to frustrate us. I pray, Father, that you would help each one of us to then wait patiently for you and cry out to you and let you direct our path and pull us out of the pit of destruction, the miry clay, and, man, Father, just set our feet on that solid rock. And then help us to praise you and let people know your work in our lives. Thank you again, Father, for who you are. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.